All right, what's up, my Knights Radiant? Welcome to Phantology's sixth and final review of Rhythm of War. Feels like we've been reviewing this book forever, but we're finally going to do a non-spoiler episode. So this episode's going to be no spoilers. It's going to be roughly 15 minutes long. We'll see how we do, and then we're going to follow it up immediately with a spoiler video, a spoiler episode. And in that, we'll give kind of our like general thoughts on the book, talk some plot points and characters, etc. What do we like? What do we not like? But to get started, we're going to just kind of talk about like Stormlight Archive in general and Rhythm of War. So if you haven't read any of the books previously, like if you haven't even read Way of Kings, we're going to do a bit of a primer and then talk in general terms about what we thought about the fourth book. So all of that said, Ryan has an intro prepared for us for the Stormlight Archive. So Ryan, tell everyone about the Stormlight Archive.
In a world where crabs are oversized and storms wreck the land. That's all I got.
That's it. That's the non-spoiler review right there.
Ryan's like, you gotta pay me for more.
So now we have to talk about what happens in the world after that intro into the world.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is a good intro to the world, right? So like the world is kind of set and it's this big epic world, and most of the inhabitants of this world are reminiscent of what you'd find in a tide pool. You do have like your humans, right? But like everything else is very crustacean like. And you have like these storms that kind of go through, reminiscent of how a wave would go through a tide pool. And so Sanderson has said that this was his inspiration, was that of a tide pool and how kind of life adapts. So that's kind of like the big broad strokes of what the world would look like when you dive into it.
Yeah, the world building for Stormlight Archive is top notch. I'm going to say bar none, probably the best world building I've seen out there in fantasy. It's just incredibly immersive into this alien setting. But I feel like after reading 4 books, I feel like I could live in Roshar and I would understand how everything works, even though it's nothing like Earth at all, really, except for humans live there, kind of.
Yep. Yeah. The other big part of the setting is what are called spren, and spren are little creatures that respond to emotion. They also respond to elements, like there's fire spren or anger spren. And so those are pop up a lot in the world. At first, they're kind of just part of the setting, but then they become more important to the story as you progress, as you would expect. And that's another really unique thing about the setting.
And then past the setting, let's talk about another big part of the series, which is the characters. The characters are incredibly well realized, very in depth. We get long sequences of backstories and flashbacks, and they're all kind of dealing with different baggages, a lot of it mental and emotional, and it's very well done. Sanderson has definitely done his research here, and he represents a lot of things that probably are not seen as much in fantasy or in the world, really, but are really cool to see on page. And I think a lot of people can relate to the characters very strongly. Like, I feel like some of the characters are my friends, and you know, I cheer when they have triumphs, and I'm sad when they things are not working out well for them.
Yeah, so I think characters are great. You mentioned that we get long flashbacks. Each of the books is kind of devoted to one of our main characters and exploring their backstory a little bit. And so you definitely like look forward. Like if you love your character, then like you're going to be excited to read their book, right? Like, and so that's really kind of like a unique thing that Sanderson has done with this. Yeah. So Jake, you haven't said much. If you like, what type of person would enjoy the Stormlight Archive, right? Like, why would you want to like start in on this?
Jake is
I
busted.
mean, epic fantasy for sure. Also, if you're someone who likes epic fantasy and sci-fi, I think there's just enough of a sci-fi element to it to really capture that. The world building is kind of sci-fi-esque. They're on this totally alien planet with its own alien ecology, as we mentioned before. And then, yeah, just these great characters. And as much as there's this huge plot and this amazing world, it's really character driven. So if you like character growth and watching people develop and grow over time, then I think you'd really like this series.
And what other series is it similar to? I mean, obviously, Wheel of Time is a great comparison. Sanderson finished the Wheel of Time, so no surprises there, and it's epic and kind of the same sense. I guess also maybe like Song of Ice and Fire a little bit. I guess I'm just kind of throwing out fantasy epics.
Yeah. You get, I mean, it's hard because most things are compared to Stormlight Archive. Like you could say Lightbringer, but if you've read Lightbringer, you probably at least know what Stormlight Archive is about because you're deep enough in fantasy that you've at least heard of it. And even if you haven't read it, you have a good idea about it. But I don't know. It's kind of just, if you talk to somebody that's never read any fantasy, you can say it's in the same kind of vein as like Lord of the Rings, where it's kind of set in a Renaissance type environment. I don't like where you have horses
I'd have to disagree with most of these takes. I feel like it's so different than all of this fantasy. I mean, like than Wheel of Time, Song of Ice and Fire, Lord of the Rings.
No comparisons.
I feel like it's so fresh and different that it's like if you knew about Lord of the Rings, and I don't know, to me it's completely different in a really good way.
If you're talking to somebody that has only read, say, it's more similar to Lord of the Rings than it is to like Divergent or
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
that's fair.
Like
it's fantasy. But maybe we don't have to compare it. But like, what if we say, if you're somebody that likes to read a lot, right? Because these are long, like they range between 1,000 pages and 1,200 pages. So like you have to enjoy
people of that.
You have to enjoy reading. You have to enjoy kind of reading about the setting and reading about like there's long periods of time where not a lot of action occurs and you're just kind of getting to know the characters and getting to know the setting, right? So we should make that like clear up front that these are large books and you just have to enjoy the story.
I mean, there is action throughout. I would say maybe there's not super epic action the whole time. There's always things happening. We're not just sitting around on our hands doing nothing but yeah, like you say, like there are some slower parts as well that are much more about developing the characters.
And compared to Hunger Games, it's like it is pretty slow, right? You can read Hunger Games and within a few pages there's like epic action, you know, duels and stuff going on. I feel like you can go through an entire length of Hunger Games book before you get to like another big battle. And
I mean, isn't this just kind of true of all epic fantasy, where you're going to have long periods of time where the action might not be quite as present as it is in shorter books? I feel like epic fantasy really takes time in between. When you're traveling, it takes advantage of all those moments, which might be ignored in other books because they get too long.
And this is well paced. You know, like some crazy action might not be going on, but there's a lot of character development going on. There's a lot of interesting discussions happening. I feel like it's well paced enough so that I enjoy it, but some people might not. It's not a criticism. I was just like, you know, if you're thinking about picking up Stormlight Archive, like this is kind of what you should know going into it.
Okay, so we are talking about book 4 here, and I think we can kind of give a review of the book without having to talk around the first 3 books entirely. So with that backdrop of what the series is, how'd you guys like the 4th book?
My little like quick take on it is I enjoyed every minute of reading it. There's never a part where I was like, dang, like this is boring, skip ahead, like let me just get to the action or anything like that. I really enjoyed it the whole time I was reading it. But after finishing it, thinking back, there were probably 2 or 3 things that I think could have been done better, could have been like been written tighter or cleaned up a little bit. So it's in no ways a perfect book. Part of that comes from the fact that it is the penultimate book. That's our favorite word to use. right now. So there's lots of build up and setup for the last book, which is going to be, like the big climax of the first 5 books. And so there's that already. But honestly, I really enjoyed it, but I think there were some parts that should have been like a little bit tidier.
So for me, it was my 3rd favorite book. I liked it better than Oathbringer. I liked it. I think I liked Words of Radiance and Way of Kings better. I think it would go Words of Radiance, Way of Kings, Rhythm of War, Oathbringer for me in my little.
Okay.
I've been excited to hear Ryan's take on this.
Well, I mean, I think it's similar to Jake's. Well, I kind of knew going into the ending part that the Sanderlanche, as we like to call it, the Sanderson Avalanche, which takes place in a lot of his books, in which there's quite a bit of setup, and not to say setup in a bad way, but it just makes the payoff so much sweeter when you get to that ending part, in which Sanderson just brings it all together in such a masterful way. And I think that for me, the setup it wasn't quite as well done as it was in the other books, and same with the the Sanderlanche. And so this would be my least favorite Stormlight Archive book so far, and not necessarily to say that it's a bad book, but I just didn't find myself to be as drawn into the world this time around. And I think there were maybe it was my fault that I had certain expectations going into this book, certain things that I wanted to happen, and certain ways I wanted the characters to develop that weren't those expectations weren't met. And so maybe somebody who has different expectations would have enjoyed the book a bit differently. But so long story short, it's my least favorite Stormlight Archive book today. I think my list goes number 1, Words of Radiance, close second, Way of Kings, number 3 is Oathbringer, number 4 is Rhythm of War.
I didn't realize how many of you guys didn't like Rhythm of War so much.
Yeah,
I mean Oathbringer. I really liked Oathbringer.
Okay.
And again, if you want to hear some specifics of what we've talked about here, we're trying to talk around spoilers. Tune into the next episode, and we're going to explain what these specifics were that were too long or whatnot. But come on, there were a lot of good things in this book as well, right? I mean, we all liked the book.
I wasn't saying it was a bad book.
Yeah, I think Ryan and I both really liked the book. Like I said, I enjoyed every minute of reading it. Just looking back, comparing it to his other works, I was like, okay, the page, and I'm usually all for the longer the book, the better. Like if it's longer and all good, make it as long as possible.
Yes,
but this one I felt like, okay, it didn't need to be as long as it was. Like what the story held didn't need to be as many pages as it was.
Okay. That's fair. I think that's a hot take, but I agree with Steven. I think we all really like the book. And so if you're sitting here listening to this podcast and haven't read the book yet, go read the freaking book.
Read the book.
If you've made it 3,000 pages in, you're not going to be disappointed in the next 1,200 pages. You might not like it as much as you maybe would have hoped, but go read the book.
I don't know. I think that's kind of lowering expectations more than they need to be lowered. I think that this book was excellently done. And for me, it might even, I don't know, Way of Kings just has so much nostalgia for me, but I think that this is better paced than Way of Kings was, in my opinion. So
I'm going to say Way of Kings was my favorite, probably because of what you said, Josh. So much nostalgia. I've read the thing 4 times. I know everything that happens in the book. I love it. So that's going to be my number 1 favorite. I think this is my 2nd favorite Stormlight book yet. And Words of Radiance and Oathbringer are 3 and 4. I haven't really sorted them out yet. I might have liked Oathbringer more, actually. Words of Radiance.
Oathbringer.
Yeah, Words of Radiance is all right. But anyway, like you said, this is the great book. And if you've read the first three and you're considering reading the fourth, like for sure do it. And you're going to enjoy it. Like Jake said, you're going to love every minute of it. Yeah, maybe there's some things we can nitpick, but overall, I really liked it. And if you're listening to this and haven't read any Stormlight Archive yet, then also go read it. It's a great series.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like I heard some criticism before actually reading the book about the pacing and lack of viewpoints from certain characters. It does, like the roster does get shaken up a little bit in this book, who is focused on. But having read it, I don't really like, I do see the pacing thing to an extent, but not to like the degree that I heard people criticize it over. Like the pacing isn't perfect. And I honestly think Way of Kings has better pacing, but he's done better pacing, but it doesn't mean the pacing is bad. Like I didn't think it detracted from the story at all. And I honestly, I didn't feel like those characters that weren't as much of a focus in the book were like left behind at all. Like I was excited to read everyone's viewpoints that were in front of me.
Okay, so the last thing I want to address before closing this segment up is, if you have you read Dawn Shard? Like, do you need to read Dawn Shard before reading this book?
Oh, that's
Quick
a
yes or
popular
no?
question. Yeah,
So-
no, you
so-
don't need to.
Yeah, so I still have
Yeah.
not read Dawn Shard. I'm going to read it this weekend.
Josh.
But no, hear me out. I primarily didn't do it so that I could at least like one of us could be in the position of having not read it by the time we do this review.
Yeah,
There's-
yeah. I
I'm
believe
serious.
you.
I think there's only
Sure.
one interlude that connects to Dawn Shard, but like you guys are saying, it's not necessary. I
So-
think you still get the gist of what's going on from
Yeah.
that interlude. So
There was absolutely no point when I was lost not having read Dawn Shard. There
Yeah.
was like some things that were spoiled about Dawn Shard with who lives and who dies in Dawn, or I guess who we know characters
Right.
that live in the book
Yeah.
because they're in the book.
right.
Mhm.
And the events take place after Dawn Shard. And then there's like, you also kind of know some vague results of the mission that they go on in Dawn Shard. And
Mhm.
so that's, so some minor things get spoiled for you, I guess.
I
But-
don't know, because I think that with Rhythm of War, you start to open up a Stormlight Archive to the greater Cosmere so much more than in the other books. And I think that starts in Dawn Shard. And I mean, I guess you guys are right that you'll still understand probably 98% of the story without reading Dawn Shard. But I think it's it adds to the experience.
I would say if you are a Cosmere enthusiast, Dawn Shard is a must. But just for understanding from Oathbringer to Rhythm of War, for the Stormlight Archive first 5 books story arc, it's not a must. But it's great. You should read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so to close out the non-spoiler, we're just going to quick roundtable. Everyone give a review out of 10. So I'm going 9 out of 10.
Cool. I'm going 8 out of 10.
I'm going to splitting the difference between you two, 8.5 out of 10.
You guys are pretty. I'm surprised how low you guys are. I mean, I have a similar. I think I'm similar to Ben, probably an 8.25, but
You're going 2.5. Oh man.
I'm going 8.75 if you're going 8.25.
Going 9.125.
I'm going
Keep the
9 and
average
5
the
eighths.
same.
I just felt like, I mean, we were arguing kind of different sides of like our opinions on the book in terms of our favorites, and then we have similar ways that we rate it.
Well,
out
I
of
think
10.
that they're all between an 8 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10. You know, like I think that they all fall in that range for me.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
talking about like 4 of the best fantasy books out there. Which one did we
Yeah.
like the most and least? I mean, they're all the best, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Mine's like either a high 7 or an 8. I'm not sure.
Cool.
And
Say 8.
and we all have different like rating systems, you know, personally. I was just surprised at some of the parts that weren't as clean as I wanted them to be, but I enjoyed every bit of it. And honestly, for me, the ending, people say it didn't have that Sanderlanche, but I felt like it did. in a different way. Like it wasn't like as
I think
Okay,
that this was-
let's talk about this during the spoilers. See,
I
I
think
think for a
that-
quick rating out of 10.
yeah. I think that
Okay.
this
It's
was
like
the
the
best.
debate, okay?
I mean, I didn't give any
right now.
spoilers, but yeah, I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Thank you for respecting my quick rating, Ben.
I feel like we're in a presidential debate.
Yeah.
You're going over
Gosh.
2 minutes.
Will you shut up, man?
All right. On that note, if you want to listen to our full review of the book with apparently some hot takes incoming, recap of this one. We all liked the book, but some of us liked it more than others, although all 4 of them are awesome. You can find more Phantology online at www.phantologybooks.com. And if you want to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/phantology_books. So we're signing off now for those of you who have not yet read Rhythm of War. And we'll be back on whenever you decide to tune into the next episode. See ya.